Most people don't realize that the greatest battles of their lives are not fought on the outside, but on the inside. Long before defeat shows up in your circumstances, it begins as a quiet thought in your mind, a whisper that says you're not good enough, a suggestion that nothing will ever change, a reminder of a past failure that keeps replaying itself over and over again. That is where the real fight is taking place. Your mind has become a battlefield, and every negative thought is not harmless. It is strategic. It comes with one purpose: to weaken your faith, drain your hope, and slowly push you away from the life God intends for you. You see, negative thinking rarely announces itself loudly. It slips in subtly, disguised as logic, realism, or even humility. It says, be careful, don't expect too much. It says, others may succeed, but not you. And if you're not alert, you begin to accept those thoughts as truth. But not every thought you have deserves your agreement. Just because a thought enters your mind does not mean it belongs there. The enemy understands something many people forget. If he can control your thinking, he can influence your direction. That's why the attack starts in the mind. Some of you are carrying battles no one else can see. You smile on the outside, but inside there is constant conflict. You're fighting doubt when you wake up. You're fighting fear when you try to move forward. You're fighting discouragement when you pray and don't see immediate answers. And the danger is not that these thoughts come, it's that we let them stay. When negative thinking is allowed to settle, it builds strongholds. It convinces you that your situation is permanent, that your prayers are powerless, and that your future is already decided. But hear this clearly: awareness is the beginning of victory. The moment you recognize that this is a battle, you stop being a passive victim and start becoming a warrior. You stop blaming circumstances and start examining thoughts. You realize that some of the pain you've been feeling is not because God is absent, but because your mind has been under attack. And once you recognize the battlefield, you can choose how to fight. You were never meant to live imprisoned by your thoughts. God did not give you a mind to be a place of constant torment, but a place where truth, peace, and faith can dwell. The battle in your mind is not a sign that you are weak. It is often a sign that something powerful is ahead of you. Resistance usually means there is something worth resisting. The enemy does not fight what poses no threat. So when those negative thoughts rise up, don't panic. Don't feel ashamed. Stand firm and remember who you belong to. This is not just mental, it is spiritual. And spiritual battles require spiritual awareness. You cannot win tomorrow's life with yesterday's thinking. Something has to change. And it begins when you recognize that the war is real, the battlefield is your mind, and surrender is not an option. Because the moment you recognize the battle, you are already one step closer to victory. Fear has a way of speaking louder than truth if you let it. It doesn't shout all at once. It whispers persistently, repeating the same message until it feels convincing. It tells you to hold back, to stay safe, to avoid risk. It convinces you that trusting God too deeply is dangerous, that stepping forward might cost you more than staying where you are. Fear paints pictures in your mind of everything that could go wrong, and before long, those pictures begin to feel more real than the promises of God. But understand this clearly. Fear is not a guide, it is a liar. And if you listen to it long enough, it will lead you away from the very life you were created to live. Fear always magnifies the problem and minimizes the power of God. It takes a temporary challenge and turns it into a permanent threat. It takes one unanswered prayer and convinces you that none will ever be answered. It points to your weakness while ignoring God's strength. And when fear is in control, faith is pushed aside. That's why fear feels so heavy. It was never meant to carry the weight of your decisions. God never designed fear to be your counselor, your protector, or your source of wisdom. Fear doesn't bring clarity, it brings confusion. It doesn't bring peace, it brings paralysis. Many people believe fear is just a natural response, something you have no choice but to accept. But fear only has the authority you give it. The problem is not that fear shows up, it will, but that we begin to treat it as truth. We start making life decisions based on what we're afraid of losing instead of what God has promised to give. We stop praying boldly and start praying cautiously. We stop dreaming and start surviving. And slowly, almost without realizing it, fear builds a prison around our potential. Fear loves to remind you of your past failures. It says, remember what happened last time? It tells you that you're not strong enough, not faithful enough, not qualified enough. But fear never reminds you of the times God brought you through. It never points to the doors that opened unexpectedly or the strength that appeared when you thought you had none left. Fear has selective memory, and it always chooses the evidence that keeps you stuck. Here is the truth you must hold on to. Faith does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing to trust God in spite of it. Courage is not the feeling of confidence. It is the decision to move forward even when your hands are shaking. Every step of obedience you take will be challenged by fear, because fear knows that obedience unlocks blessing. That's why fear tries to stop you at the starting line. It wants to keep you questioning instead of trusting, hesitating instead of moving. When you stop listening to fear, you start hearing something else. A quiet but steady voice reminding you that God is in control. Fear says you are alone. Faith says you are not. Fear says this is the end. Faith says this is only the beginning. Fear says you will fail. Faith says God will sustain you. One voice leads to retreat, the other leads to victory. And every day, sometimes every moment, you must choose which voice will have your attention. Fear will always ask, what if it doesn't work? Faith responds, what if God is faithful? Fear asks, what if you lose? Faith answers, what if God provides? You cannot silence fear by arguing with it. You silence fear by trusting God more than you trust your feelings. Feelings change, circumstances shift, but God remains the same. Some of you are standing at the edge of something God is calling you into, and fear is the last obstacle trying to hold you back. It feels convincing, it feels logical, and it feels safe. But safety without faith leads to stagnation. God did not call you to live a small, guarded life ruled by fear. He called you to walk by faith, even when the path ahead is unclear. Stop giving fear a seat in your decisions. Stop letting it define your limits. When fear speaks, let faith answer. And when faith answers, take the step anyway. Because the moment you stop listening to fear is the moment faith begins to lead your life. You cannot defeat negative thinking by simply trying to empty your mind. A mind left empty does not stay empty for long. If you do not intentionally fill it with truth, something else will rush in to take its place. That is why so many people find themselves trapped in cycles of doubt and discouragement even after deciding they want to change. They push one negative thought out only for another to take its place because nothing stronger has been planted there. The mind needs direction, and without truth, it will always drift back to fear, worry, and hopelessness. Every negative thought must be challenged by something greater. Lies cannot be defeated by willpower alone. They must be replaced by truth. When discouragement says you are forgotten, truth says you are seen. When doubt says this situation is impossible, truth says nothing is beyond God's reach. When shame says you are disqualified, truth says you are forgiven and restored. What you repeatedly allow into your mind becomes the voice you trust and eventually the voice you obey. Many people wonder why peace feels so distant, even though they believe in God. The answer is often simple but uncomfortable. They spend more time listening to fear than to truth. You cannot feed your mind on worry all week and expect faith to rise when you need it most. Just as your body responds to what you eat, your spirit responds to what you consume mentally and spiritually. If your thoughts are constantly filled with negative words, toxic influences, and hopeless mess, sages, your inner life will reflect that. Replacing negative thoughts requires intention. It means choosing what you dwell on when no one else is watching. It means turning off voices that drain your faith and leaning into words that strengthen it. It means reminding yourself of God's promises when circumstances try to contradict them. This is not denial, it is alignment. You are not pretending the problem doesn't exist. You are choosing to believe that God is greater than the problem. Truth has a way of recentering the soul. When you speak it, even quietly, something shifts inside you. Hope begins to rise where despair once lived. Strength replaces exhaustion. Confidence begins to return, not because everything around you has changed, but because something within you has. Truth renews the mind, and a renewed mind sees life differently. The same challenge that once felt overwhelming now feels manageable, not because it shrank, but because your perspective grew. There will be moments when negative thoughts feel relentless. They come early in the morning and linger late at night. In those moments, you must be deliberate. You speak truth even when you don't feel it. You hold on to promises even when you don't see results. Faith is often built in repetition. Every time you choose truth over lies, you are strengthening something within you that cannot be shaken easily. Over time, what once required effort becomes your natural response. Instead of panic, there is prayer. Instead of despair, there is trust. Instead of defeat, there is quiet confidence. This is not a sudden transformation, it is a daily discipline. One thought at a time, one decision at a time, your mind begins to reflect the truth you have planted there. And when truth takes root in your mind, negative thinking loses its power to control your life. One of the most powerful sources of negative thinking, the past. Old mistakes, missed opportunities, broken relationships, and moments of failure have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. You may be moving forward on the outside, but on the inside, memories keep pulling you backward. The mind replays what went wrong and asks, what if I had done things differently? Before long, regret turns into guilt, and guilt turns into shame. And shame has a voice. It tells you that you are permanently defined by what you did or what was done to you. But the truth is this: your past may explain some things about you, but it does not have the authority to define you. God has never measured a person's future by their failures. He sees beyond the worst moment of your life and calls out the purpose still inside you. When negative thinking uses your past as evidence that you are disqualified, it ignores the very nature of grace. Grace does not minimize failure, but it refuses to let failure have the final word. Many people struggle not because they doubt God's power, but because they doubt God's willingness to use them again. They believe forgiveness is possible, but restoration feels too far out of reach. So they live cautiously, holding back from purpose, convinced that their best days are behind them. But God does not redeem your past just to leave you stuck in it. He redeems it so it no longer controls you. There are things you regret that God has already released you from. There are mistakes you still punish yourself for that God has already forgiven. And as long as you keep looking back, negative thinking will keep telling you that your future is limited. But God is not in the business of recycling guilt. He is in the business of transformation. What the enemy wants to use as a permanent label, God uses as a testimony of His mercy and power. You must understand that holding on to shame does not honor God. It questions His grace. When you refuse to let go of the past, you are not being humble. You are being held hostage by a lie. God's forgiveness is complete. When He releases you, He does not leave conditions attached. He does not remind you of what you were. He invites you into what you are becoming. Negative thinking says you've failed too much. God says you've learned enough. Negative thinking says you're damaged. God says you're being restored. Negative thinking says it's too late. God says now is the time. Every time you agree with shame, you silence faith. Every time you accept grace, you step into freedom. Your past does not scare God. It does not surprise Him. He was present in every moment, even the ones you wish you could erase. And if He did not abandon you then, He is not abandoning you now. The same God who brought you through what was behind you is the God who is leading you into what lies ahead. You cannot walk confidently into the future while dragging the weight of yesterday behind you. Let the past be a lesson, not a prison. Let grace have the final word, because when God redeems your past, He unlocks your future. There will be days when faith feels strong and everything inside you is confident and hopeful, but there will also be days when you wake up tired, uncertain, and weighed down by emotion. On those days, if you rely on feelings to guide you, you will struggle to move forward. Feelings are powerful, but they are unreliable. They shift with circumstances, energy, and mood. Faith, on the other hand, was never meant to be an emotion you wait for. It is a decision you make, and the life you build will always follow the decisions you choose, not the feelings you feel. Many people believe that if they don't feel faith, they don't have faith. But faith often shows up after the decision, not before it. You choose to trust God, and then peace begins to follow. You choose obedience, and then strength appears. If you wait until everything feels right, you will wait forever. God calls you to walk by faith, not by sight and not by emotion. Faith does not deny how you feel. It simply refuses to be controlled by it. There are moments when emotions will tell you to give up. They will tell you that nothing is changing, that prayer is pointless, that effort is wasted. But faith looks beyond the moment and anchors itself in what God has promised. Faith says, even if I don't see it yet, I believe God is working. That kind of belief does not come from emotion. It comes from commitment. Choosing faith daily means showing up even when motivation is gone. It means praying when you don't feel inspired. It means trusting when you don't feel confident. It means taking the next step even when you don't feel ready. This is where real spiritual strength is formed, not in emotional highs, but in quiet, consistent obedience. Feelings will tell you the story of your current moment. Faith tells you the story of your future. Feelings focus on what is visible. Faith focuses on what is promised. If you allow feelings to lead, they will constantly pull you back and forth. One day you will feel hopeful, the next day discouraged. But when faith leads, it creates stability. It gives you an anchor that holds even when the storm is raging. Some of the most meaningful victories in life are not accompanied by strong emotions. Sometimes faith feels ordinary, even heavy. But it is in those moments that faith is doing its deepest work. God is shaping your character, strengthening your trust, and preparing you for what lies ahead. Emotional faith fades when pressure comes. Chosen faith stands firm. Every day you are faced with a choice. You can let fear, doubt, and emotion set the direction of your life, or you can decide to trust God regardless of how you feel. One path leads to inconsistency and frustration. The other leads to growth and peace. You may not feel brave, but you can choose courage. You may not feel hopeful, but you can choose trust. You may not feel strong, but you can choose faith. And over time, something powerful happens. As you consistently choose faith, your feelings begin to follow. Peace grows. Confidence returns. Hope becomes steady. Not because circumstances changed overnight, but because you did. Because when faith becomes your choice, not your feeling, nothing can shake why. Our foundation. When negative thinking loses its grip, something powerful begins to rise within you. Confidence rooted not in yourself, but in the purpose God has placed on your life. You stop waking up wondering if your life matters and start living with the quiet assurance that it does. Purpose gives direction to your days and meaning to your struggles. It reminds you that you are not here by accident, and what you are facing is not random. God has always worked with intention, and your life is no exception. Many people live unsure, hesitant, constantly second-guessing themselves, because negative thinking has convinced them they are unqualified or unworthy. But when you understand that God has a purpose for you, you stop measuring yourself by comparison or fear. You begin to walk with confidence, not arrogance, knowing that the one who called you is faithful. Purpose does not remove challenges, but it gives you the strength to face them without losing hope. Confidence in God's purpose doesn't mean you always feel strong. It means you trust that even in weakness, God is at work. It means you keep moving forward even when the path is unclear. Purpose does not always come with clarity, but it always comes with direction. When you trust God's plan, you stop demanding all the answers and start taking the steps He places in front of you. Some of you have underestimated your life because you expected purpose to look dramatic or immediate. But purpose often unfolds quietly, faithfully, over time. It is revealed through obedience, perseverance, and trust. Every small step taken in faith matters. Every act of obedience builds momentum. When negative thinking is gone, you stop despising small beginnings and start recognizing that God often does His greatest work through steady faithfulness. Living with confidence in God's purpose also means trusting what you cannot yet see. There are moments when it feels like nothing is happening, when progress seems invisible. But God is always working behind the scenes. Growth happens before it is visible. Preparation happens before promotion. And when the time is right, what God has been developing in secret will be revealed openly. Purpose gives you resilience. When life tests you, you don't collapse, you stand. When opposition comes, you don't retreat, you endure. Purpose anchors you when emotions fluctuate and circumstances shift. It reminds you that your worth is not based on results, opinions, or outcomes, but on the calling placed upon your life by God Himself. As confidence grows, fear loses its voice. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if God is leading me?" You stop shrinking back and start stepping forward. You walk with humility, but also with assurance. You know that God doesn't waste seasons, pain, or effort. Everything is being woven together for something greater than you can imagine. When negative thinking is gone and purpose is alive, your life begins to reflect peace, courage, and faith. You stop waiting for permission to live boldly and start trusting God fully.